It was a late Thursday afternoon, and after a particularly long day filled with back-to-back meetings, errands, and phone calls that seemed to multiply by the hour, I decided to treat myself by stopping at the small neighborhood cafe I frequented for moments of quiet solitude, a place where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries always brought a sense of comfort and calm, and where I could settle in with my laptop and phone, catch up on emails, and enjoy a cup of tea while taking a break from the relentless pace of the day, little imagining that what should have been an ordinary, peaceful visit would instead spiral into one of the most absurd and stressful encounters I had ever experienced in public. As I entered the cafe, the warm, inviting smell of roasted coffee beans immediately washed over me, mixing with the faint sweetness of pastries cooling on display trays behind the counter, and I scanned the room for an empty table, knowing that around this time of day, the space often filled with a combination of students working on assignments, remote employees tapping away on laptops, and locals enjoying quiet conversations over their beverages. And I was fortunate enough to spot a corner table along the wall that had a conveniently positioned electrical outlet just above the floor, which I silently acknowledged as ideal for plugging in my phone and laptop. For a short period, while I settled in to accomplish a few tasks before heading home, with my backpack slung over one shoulder and my cup of tea in hand, I approached the table, planning to place my bag down and my devices on the tabletop, fully expecting a simple, uneventful afternoon. But almost immediately I noticed a woman at a nearby table looking at me with a sharp, piercing expression, her eyes narrowing in a way that immediately communicated displeasure, as if she had been personally wronged by the mere act of my choosing a seat near an outlet. And as I studied her demeanor, I realized she was the archetypal Karen figure one often hears about in stories online, impeccably dressed, in her 40s, with a hairstyle that seemed carefully sculpted to convey authority and control, and with an air of self-importance that seemed to fill the space around her, making it clear she considered my presence a personal affront to her sense of entitlement. Before I could even pull out my charger and plug in my phone, she leaned forward slightly, tapping her fingers on her table, and in a sharp, disapproving tone demanded, "Excuse me, are you planning to sit there?" I looked up, offering a polite smile and saying, "Yes, the outlet is available, and I just need to charge my phone for a few minutes. I won't disturb anyone." Her frown deepened, and she leaned even closer, pointing at the outlet as if she had an inherent claim to it. "You can't just sit there and use the outlet," she insisted, her voice now louder, carrying over the soft hum of conversations and the occasional clink of cups and saucers. "It's unfair to the rest of us who might need it." At first, I tried to respond calmly, attempting to diffuse the situation. "I don't mind if someone else needs it. I'll move when that happens, but right now, the outlet is free, and I won't be here long." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head violently, as if my explanation was an insult to her personal sense of justice, her face reddening slightly with irritation, and I noticed that some of the other patrons were now glancing up from their work, curious about what seemed to be the beginning of an escalating conflict over something as trivial as a wall socket. Almost immediately, she pulled out her phone, typing rapidly, muttering something that sounded like selfish behavior, disrespectful, and people taking what isn't theirs. And it quickly became apparent that she was calling 911, reporting me for a situation that had absolutely no legal implication whatsoever. My heart sank at the absurdity of the scenario. A simple choice of seat and the act of charging a phone had been reframed as a potential emergency, and yet her expression showed she was entirely convinced of the severity of her claims, making it clear that she genuinely believed she was acting in the right. The cafe, which had been humming with the usual casual energy, grew tense as a few more patrons glanced toward the scene, some whispering to one another, others shaking their heads in disbelief, while the baristas behind the counter paused in their work, eyebrows raised, clearly caught between enforcing cafe etiquette and intervening in what seemed to be an increasingly ridiculous dispute. Within minutes, the unmistakable sound of approaching sirens confirmed that the situation had escalated far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The officers arrived, entering the cafe with professional alertness, scanning the room to assess the situation, their presence instantly amplifying the tension. The woman immediately stepped forward to speak with the officers, gesturing dramatically toward me, narrating her version of events in rapid succession, insisting that I had selfishly taken her rightful spot, that I was preventing others from accessing the outlet, and that this situation warranted police intervention. Her voice rose with each sentence, and she leaned toward the officers, emphasizing each word with hand gestures, as if she were presenting irrefutable evidence of wrongdoing, while I remained seated, hands visible on the table, trying to appear calm and cooperative. The officers approached me next, politely asking for my side of the story. I explained, in measured tones, that the outlet was unoccupied when I arrived, that I had chosen the seat simply for convenience, that I had not disturbed anyone or impeded anyone's access, and that the cafe staff had not objected in any way. I also noted that my stay would be brief, and that I would willingly move if someone needed the outlet, trying to demonstrate that I was not attempting to monopolize public resources or create conflict. The officers listened attentively, asking clarifying questions, jotting down notes, and speaking briefly with the baristas, who confirmed that I had been courteous and had caused no disturbance. Despite their patience and calm professionalism, the woman continued to interject, insisting that the situation was an emergency, that my behavior constituted a deliberate violation of some unseen code, and that action needed to be taken immediately. The officers, however, maintained composure, reiterating that while businesses may have internal policies about outside devices or seating, my actions did not constitute a criminal offense, that calling 911 under these circumstances was inappropriate, and that the situation did not merit further intervention. Slowly, I watched the woman's demeanor shift from righteous indignation to visible embarrassment. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and her voice lost the intensity that had dominated the initial confrontation. She muttered complaints under her breath, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that her attempt to escalate a trivial matter into a legal incident had failed. The officers concluded their assessment by reminding her of the proper use of emergency services and encouraging calm, measured responses to minor grievances, advice that seemed to sink in only partially as she relocated to another table without attempting further escalation. I remained seated, quietly sipping my tea, reflecting on the absurdity of the encounter, and noting that other patrons had gradually returned to their activities, some exchanging subtle smiles or glances of disbelief, recognizing the overreaction but appreciating that it had been resolved. Without conflict, the cafe slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the soft hum of conversation and the gentle clatter of cups resuming, as though the prior tension had never existed, leaving only the lingering memory of how quickly a mundane action could have been misinterpreted as a serious offense. After ensuring my phone had charged enough to continue my work, I packed up my laptop and personal items, noting how lucky I had been that the situation had been handled professionally and without confrontation. As I walked out of the cafe, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the sidewalk, I reflected on how entitlement and overreaction can transform ordinary interactions into high-drama scenarios, how fragile civility can be in shared public spaces, and how patience, composure, and polite communication often provide the best shield against unnecessary conflict, allowing reason and fairness to prevail over anger and misperception. The rest of the walk home was filled with contemplation, thinking about the many ordinary scenarios in which minor misunderstandings can escalate, and how often people allow their sense of self-importance to overshadow rational judgment. Realizing that maintaining calm, courteous behavior is not only a practical choice, but also a subtle form of resistance to the chaos that entitlement can create. By the time I reached my apartment, phone fully charged and tasks completed, I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that my measured response had neutralized a potentially stressful incident, that no laws had been broken, and that the woman's overreaction had ultimately highlighted her own behavior rather than reflecting any wrongdoing on my part, leaving me with a story that was simultaneously frustrating, amusing, and instructive, a story about patience, calm, and the unexpected absurdity of everyday life.